Alrighty, finally people, I am back with another video. It's been several weeks since I had a chance to upload, and I'm always full of excuses as to why I've not uploaded. Every time I upload a video, it always begins with an excuse as to why I've not uploaded in so long. This time I wanted to upload videos because I've got this big long list of ideas and different topics I want to cover, but I've had this damn cold, even though it's like 1,000,000 degrees Celsius outside right now here in tropical Queensland. But yeah, I've had this cold that I couldn't get rid of, and my voice has only just started to return to normal. So here I am back with today's video. So let's crack into it. Alright, so what I want to do in today's video is I want to talk about one of my favourite memes on the internet, which would be the cope meme, which I'll assume that 90–95% of you are familiar with. Although, inevitably, there will be maybe 5%, 10% of people watching this video that are not familiar with the cope meme, or they've heard of it, they've heard of the term cope, but they've never truly understood what it's all about. So what I'll do is I'll give you a quick rundown for those of you that are not familiar. If somebody accuses you of coping, they're essentially accusing you of putting on a brave face to mask a difficult situation, but not so much that you're lying to other people about your situation, but more so that you're lying to yourself, that you are deluding yourself, that you're fooling yourself into thinking that a situation is better than what it really is, that you're essentially blue-pilling yourself, that you're reinforcing these comforting lies, these comforting affirmations to yourself to shield yourself from the pain and the difficulty of confronting the ugly reality of whatever difficult truth it is you're hiding from. Like, I'll give you an example, right? I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I read somewhere that 49% of Americans believe that they are going to be reunited with their pets in heaven when they die. Now, I'm not here to talk down on any one person's religion or spirituality, but it does seem like a little bit of an optimistic kind of conclusion to come to, that you're going to be reunited with Grover when you die. In a nutshell, this is basically what we mean when we talk about someone coping. They're telling themselves a comforting lie to shield themselves from the difficult reality of the situation, aka they're not going to be reunited with their pets in heaven. They're never going to see their pets once they die. That's just the nature of the earthly world that we live in. But to shield themselves from the difficult reality of this, they tell themselves a comforting lie, and thus, you would say, they're coping. However, I was watching a video by the YouTuber Millennial Thinker where he portrayed that guy on the internet, that keyboard warrior type dude, who goes around accusing everybody of coping, like, oh bro, you're coping bro, and just how obnoxious that person is.
You think someone like you can be with someone like her? I'm calling this a cope.
And it kind of got me thinking, like, is that me? Have I turned into that negative guy that just goes around accusing everyone else of coping? Because I've accused a lot of people of coping, and I've always said that cope is generally a bad thing. You know, you don't want to lie to yourself. You want to be honest with yourself as much as possible. Because sometimes it goes a lot deeper than just telling yourself a comforting affirmation. Sometimes a cope can be behavioral. Sometimes people will turn to a particular behavior as a way of coping. What I'll do is I'll start off with a hypothetical example, right? I'll start off with something purely hypothetical so you can sort of see where I'm coming from. Let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that there's a guy, a young guy in his 20s or 30s who lives alone in an apartment who really wants to find himself a girlfriend. He really wants to find himself a girl that he can wife up and have children with so he can live that trad lifestyle. And if you look at him, except for the fact that he's bald, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the way he looks, and there's nothing fundamentally wrong with his personality, other than the fact that he's a little bit socially isolated and thus gets cut off very easily and spends a lot of time living in his own thoughts. But there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the guy's core personality, but he just can't seem to find himself a girlfriend. And therefore, as a result, he spends more and more time playing video games alone in his apartment, and he gets further and further into the world of playing games and whatever, you know, just spending more and more time on his computer, drifting deeper and deeper into a virtual world. Well, in this case, I would say it's a bad cope, because he had the power within him to find himself a girl, despite all of the hurdles out there for normal guys, despite all of the obstacles that normie guys face. He's still a young guy in his 20s with nothing fundamentally wrong with him. There are other guys out there with his looks and personality who could have easily ascended, but he gave up before his time was due, as the song goes. And as a result, he descended further and further into a world of video games. So therefore, I would say that that would be a bad cope, okay? Now, why is it a bad cope? Because the behavior that he turned to didn't help his situation. It didn't just distract himself from a reality that he couldn't do anything about. He had the power to keep at it, to keep grinding it out and finding himself a girlfriend, irrespective of all of the barriers that are in the way for normie guys to get a girl. But he gave up before his time was due, and as a result, it became a bad cope. It became something that just made his situation worse. Playing video games and descending into an online world was a bad cope for him. It was counterproductive. But if you had a 60-year-old homeless guy who was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer, who turned to playing video games as a way of distracting himself from the physical pain that he's in before he dies, well, that would be a good cope, because the cope is not distracting him from something that he fundamentally had control over. And that's what I'm trying to do in today's video. I'm trying to give you guys the tools to introspect upon yourselves and look at your behaviors and determine if they're good copes or bad copes. Are the things that you're doing to distract yourself from things that are unpleasant in your life, whether it be positive affirmations that you tell yourself or behavioral tendencies, are they working for you or against you? Is MGTOW a cope? Is NoFap a cope? Is mewing a cope? This can be determined very simply by introspecting upon your situation and determining if something that you're doing or telling yourself is making your situation better or worse. Is it being used as a distraction from something that you can't change, or is it something that you're doing because you don't want to face a difficult reality that if you were to face it would make your life better and richer? That's how you can sort of that's how you can navigate through the forest of cope. Like, I'm not sure how widely known this is, but there are dudes out there on some of these forums who are unironically claiming to be what they call gay coping. This is a phenomenon where supposedly straight guys turn towards male-male sexual contact as a cope for the fact that they can't find themselves any female affection. Like, I know that some of these dudes are just trolling, but the fact that this is even a real phenomenon is pretty messed up. Anyway, the reason why I brought it up is because, hypothetically, if some 19, 20-year-old dude came to my comment section and told me that he's thinking of turning towards other men as a way of comforting himself against sexual loneliness, well, my advice to that dude, under all circumstances, would be not to do that. And the reason why is because I don't need to be a psychologist to know that the potential ramifications in terms of, like, self-loathing and shame and all sorts of negative implications would be so high that it would be very irresponsible of me to condone that type of thing. However, if some other dude around the same age, 19, 20 years old, if he came to my comment section and told me that he is attracted to other men and that he doesn't want to pursue girls, that he's only attracted to dudes, well then my advice would be very, very different. Because at the end of the day, what's the difference between, to quote a reference to my TikTok video, a Ricky Martin situation where you've got a multi-millionaire Chad who can get any girl he wants to, but chooses to be in a relationship with another man, versus some dude in a forum somewhere who wants to get with girls but can't because there's something fundamentally wrong with him, or because, because of hypergamy or whatever the hell, right? Who chooses to sleep with other men as a cope. Like, what's the difference there? I'll let you figure that out. But there's a huge difference psychologically between those two situations, now isn't there? And the reason why I bring this rather sordid example up is to point out that you can't just say that one particular behavior is a cope. Like, you can't just say that any dude who goes to the gym is by definition coping, because it's not all-encompassing. And to go even deeper than that, and this is the part of the video where some people may lose touch with what I'm talking about, but this is a very real point that I want to make, and I've seen this over and over again. A lot of people, and this is not just a guy thing, I've seen a lot of women do this, they think that if they could find themselves a true love, a significant other who would love them unabashedly, then all of the problems in their life, their loneliness, their anxiety, their depression, it would all just kind of fade away. And what they may never realize, because they may never find this person, is that if that was to happen, it wouldn't actually in and of itself do all that much. They would still be the same broken person with someone in the room next to them that loves them, but they would still have the same problems. And then it just keeps moving. Well, maybe if we were to go away on a long extended holiday, maybe that would, cure me of this heavy weight of sadness that kind of roams within me. And then there would be they're on a beach somewhere with their significant other haunted by the same problems. You know what I mean? Like it would just follow them no matter what they do because the problem is built into the neurons of their brain. But the ironic thing, and this is the part of the video where you're going to lose touch with what I'm saying, is that in the meantime, in their quest for what would ultimately be a cope, having a significant other, having a true love would ultimately be a cope for the thing that's negatively affecting them, they find sub-copes. They find ways of coping with the fact that they can't find this mythical person who, unbeknownst to them, would do nothing for them. So there are layers and layers of cope that one must explore, one must introspect upon themselves if they're to ever kind of uncover what's going to make them happy and what's not going to make them happy. Have I lost you guys yet? Are you listening to this like, man, CBP's gone too deep, man. This is a dumb video. He should just make fun of CRP and talk about something I can understand. When I was young, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I would get drunk with my girlfriend at the time, and we would, get drunk and make out, and it was just a wonderful time in my life. I don't need to repeat it because I've already talked about it quite a bit, but it was just a really happy period, And after we broke up, when I was, 22, 23, I continued to go out drinking every weekend, and I still had some good times, hooked up with some girls and just had, fun with people, just good times in my early 20s when going out drinking. But what happened is that as I got into my late 20s, I would continue to binge drink from time to time, not every weekend, but I would always make a point every now and then of getting drunk and just going out. And I wasn't having anywhere near as much fun either. I was just going out and spending a whole bunch of money and getting nothing back from it, just waking up the next morning hungover, and the alcohol would kind of interrupt my weekend. It would interrupt everything. And I kept doing it. And it was only like about 3 or 4 months ago that I got into an embarrassing incident at a bar where I got kicked out, that the next morning when I was lying there with a headache, I introspected upon, why do I go out in my 30s and get drunk? Why do I do this shit? And it was actually a fellow YouTuber, a guy in his 30s, who was also a very big binge drinker in his early 20s, a bit of a former party goer. And he put it into words. And even though I already knew this deep down, it's not exactly rocket science, but hearing somebody else put it into words really drove the point home for me. And what he said was, it's simple self-programming. For example, if we're young, 15, 16, and we sneak out and get drunk with our friends, then we will forever, subconsciously, associate alcohol with being young and breaking the rules and being youthful, That's what we will associate alcohol with from there on out. Kind of like how music has the power to do the exact same thing, although with music we tend to be a bit more aware of it because we all know that feeling of just utter nostalgia where we hear a song playing on the radio or whatever from years prior. Like I mentioned Ricky Martin before. That song that he sang from back in the day, Private Emotion, whenever I hear that song, I am teleported back through time like something out of a Stephen King novel. I'm teleported back to middle school and dancing with the first girl I ever had a real crush on at our little middle school ball thingy because that song was playing on the speaker the first time I ever danced to the girl that I had a crush on. And it was just, I heard that song for the first time a little while ago in nearly 20 years, and it was the biggest mindfuck. It was like, holy shit. And a few months ago, I got kicked out of a bar in a very embarrassing incident I'm not going to go into again. But essentially, I woke up the next morning and decided this is it. It's time for me to give up alcohol because this shit ain't serving me anymore. And I thought that it was going to be very difficult, but once I realized how I was coping, and how I was coping was that, I was very deep subconsciously coping with the fact that this weekend I'm not turning 21. This weekend I'm not going to meet my girlfriend. This weekend, I'm not doing anything that I did when I was young. I'm well into my 30s with a boring, almost approaching middle-aged kind of weekend planned. And I was using alcohol as a cope for that. But once I realized that it was a cope, once I became fully black-pilled about what I was doing, it just became so much easier to not drink again. Once you become aware of your copes and why they are copes, it's much easier to give them up. Anyway, This video is kind of dumb. I don't think this is one of my best videos, but I just wanted to talk about this because it had been several weeks since I had uploaded a video. And I wanted to talk about this because we talk about copes all the time, especially on this channel. You know, I'm so big when it comes to the word cope. I'm always saying, well, hey, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. It's a cope. You know, I've called everything a cope. I've called the red pill a cope. I've called just about everything you can think of. I've called semen retention a cope. So if I'm going to talk about cope, I need to expatiate on how to identify it and recognize when it's serving you in a good way, which it can do. You know, if it's making your life better and richer, then sometimes, you know, what do they say? It's either cope or rope, so you may as well cope. But also recognizing when the cope is working against you and where it's just an unnecessary adjunct to your life. And I really wanted to talk about this, but yeah, that's it. I guess I should give a quick shout out to some of my newer subscribers. You know, I've always got new subs coming in. That TikTok video about teenagers hit 1.1 million views. It was at 900,000 just a few weeks ago. So that's continued to bring in new people. And yeah, I'm glad you're all here. And I will, no matter what happens, I will be on YouTube for the long haul. I won't be, you know, quitting or slowing down production. I'll always be here uploading. I just get a bit busy from time to time, that's all. Other than that, thanks for listening.
Too much cope for you. Impossible, you are coping. Coping. Not a single man should have that much cope. You can't escape the cope.